Well, hello, friends. Here we are again with All Things Paris. And today's guest, I am so excited to share with you. Such a wonderful lady. I call her my fierce redhead friend. This fabulous woman, business owner, graduated with a Bachelor's of Science degree in landscape architecture at Cal Poly Pomona in 1985. For some of you, you were just being born then. She's worked in several landscape firms throughout Southern California. She was heavily involved in the Building Industry Association and its educational arm, Home Builders Council. She served on the HBC board as co-member since 1989. She's married to her fabulous husband, Jim, and they did that in 1992. She lived in Costa Mesa and has two children. They moved to Bakersfield in 98 and bought a house, worked as a stay-at-home mom while her husband telecommuted from Costa Mesa. She became and dabbled in Pampered Chef and went to director within 5 years. She started back to work in 2004 at McIntosh and Associates as landscape architect. She and her husband, kind of crazy, this is her story, so similar to Kenny and I's. She and her husband, they lost their jobs in 2008 and they started their own business. And I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about that when I bring her on. But they started that in 2009. They have worked as landscape architects with local construction professionals, specifically in projects for schools and commercial. They've done a couple of estates as well, so we'll talk a little bit about that. She is serving the CLCA, California Landscape Contractors Association local chapter, as secretary. And then she's just a part of a ton of good organizations that we'll get the opportunity to chat about, so you can learn about them and see if it's something that you're interested in. And if not interested in those particular organizations, really just to encourage you to get involved, right? She is also serving as the NAWBO. She was introduced to that particular program or organization by Kathy Clark in 2015. That's an incredible organization growing here locally, like just amazingly, for women-owned businesses. And she helped charter that, I believe so. She also served on the local chapter board as public policy director since 2019 and is president-elect for 2021. She's also a member of the Bakersfield Republican Women's Federated and serves on the leadership committee. She has served on the NAWBO board in the education director position last year and is continuing this year. She has 2 dogs, 3 cats, and she loves the Dodgers. So put your hands together and welcome Megan Rios. Super, super, super jazzed to have her with us. So round of applause, yippee! Megan, I had so much amazing stuff to share about you. I was getting tongue-tied.
Well, that's really nice. Thank you. Appreciate that, Paris.
I didn't share I think I did share you're my fierce redheaded friend. I just love your fervor and your tenacity just towards everything you believe in. And I think that's so cool and so needed in today's world.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I love your bubbliness. It's authentic. You can't find that anymore. You know, that just ready to be positive. I love that about you. So
well,
glad we get to be friends.
Likewise. Yeah, no, it's good stuff. So landscape architecture. Mm-hmm. What? Landscape architect? Who? What? What do you do?
What do I do? Well, I create legal documents, and these legal documents, and that sometimes people don't start with that. They think it's all design, but it's really about creating legal documents that you're able to prepare plans. As architects do a building, we do everything on the property. So we're improving the property through hardscape, other features, landscape, and irrigation, so that it can be maintained, because here in California, we need irrigation, especially in Bakersfield. Where other places, the East Coast and other places where they get more rain, that's not as needed, but it is definitely needed here.
Oh, wow. That's
so
incredible. I never thought about the fact that you've got to, so when you're talking irrigation, you know, how you're moving water and soil. So since we don't get a lot, so you're grabbing it, I'm assuming, from other places, maybe recycling some of it.
That it's in the works using gray water from a house. We don't do a lot of residences. We have done residences in the past, but we typically do schools and commercial. We'll do residential development when it comes to doing streetscapes or parks, those kind of things that tend to do directly with a larger amount of area, not a typical home. But that doesn't mean we haven't done that. That's just what we choose to do in those bigger projects. There's not a lot of landscape firms here in Kern County, so that's what we choose to do. And when someone calls me and they say, hey, we need something from our backyard, I'll typically send them a form of licensed landscape contractors and another landscape architect who likes to draw more in this for the residential. And I'll send them a list so they have plenty of lists. We have a lot of licensed landscape contractors here. I find that's better for residents because a person, when I have dealt with residential clients, they don't always tell you what they can afford because they all think they're going to phase it, right? But a contractor will tell you what it really costs because costs change all the time. I don't have that information. And that's why doing a commercial or schools or something big, they just want to get it done. They have this amount of money and they got to get this done. And I have to meet all the needs of the municipalities, whether it's a city or a county or a DSA, which is Department of, I think it's School Administration. So everybody has these lists of things they need to meet, and that's my job to meet them. When we talk about conservation by design, our focus is on water conservation for the right plant material, and that's in terms of, it's called the MWELO or MWELO, Model Water Efficiency Landscape Ordinance, and that's a statewide thing. And we produce the documents to prove that every property that you're renovating or improving has a water budget, and that what our design does stays within or less than that water budget.
Wow. So very much like a building architect, you're establishing what that looks like, making what that landscape looks like from the ground up, as it were. And I'm thinking underground up.
And
then
that's
making
true.
sure it follows the municipalities, I was going to say another word, making sure it follows all those guidelines.
All right.
Wow.
And then it goes to a contractor where if you have several contractors bidding it, now they're bidding on the same thing. So it's apples to apples. So then you can go for that. And if anything along, and things do change because just because you see a plot of land on Google or the title doesn't mean something's in the way or something's different. So you work with the landscape contractor and the general contractor and the architect and even the civil to solve problems when there's something going on that wasn't foreseen in the future. And that's why you use us, is because all of our reports and our plans can be taken to court and say, this is what we were supposed to do. This was what was done. This wasn't what was done.
That's fascinating. You know, you don't, you drive by, you drop your kids off at school, you don't think about it. You think, you literally, for me at least, and I speak for at least 1,000 people in society, right? That a gardener just came in, planted everything. Here, these are where the flower beds are going to be. But no, there's actually a design that goes behind it. And I mean, obviously, you know, there's a design, but that you have to make sure you cross the T's and dot the I's. So you went to school for this. How did you just wake up one day and say, I want to go into landscaping and I want to be an architect doing it?
Well, actually, when I went to college, I applied to both San Luis Obispo and Pomona.
Okay.
Just so you know, my husband's from San Luis Obispo, or he went to San Luis Obispo, and so did my sister. But I ended up going to Pomona. Yay, Pomona! Because I just gotta put that out there.
Just minor detail.
I went into architecture thinking that was it, and then I didn't pass that. They started with 500 students and ended up with 50, and I was not one of those 50, and I'm grateful right now. I remember in second grade, and I think second grade really is a time when a lot of kids make those decisions. I kind of sat around a round table with some other professionals. In second grade, I could draw a tree and it looked like a tree. It wasn't a stick and a lollipop. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I draw the stick and lollipop today.
So I like to do a lot of art, and a part with the art too is Now my father was an engineer, so you couldn't, or you could never make money doing art. People make tons of money doing art, way more than landscape architects, but it doesn't matter.
Right,
In his
right.
mind, he's an architect. I mean, he's an engineer. So the landscape is really knowing your palette, which is your planting, and I'm making this specific, planting and your irrigation, but it does open up to any kind of hardscape, walls, overheads, fountains, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and then working within that to make that happen.
Mhm.
And working with a lot of licensed individuals, your civil engineers and your architects. What was interesting? I was surprised to hear that anyone could really draw up their residences.
Mhm,
If
mhm.
they could get it through the city, they were good. They didn't have to have a license. I'm just like that. Wow. There's no
Right.
way I would let that happen.
We
Anyway,
actually have a friend who just did that, and he won Architect of the Year. Yeah,
he
and
doesn't even have license. That's
yeah,
amazing.
no, this it was just he works in the for the oil industry and has an engineering mind,
Mhm.
but he's not an engineer. So yeah, it's fascinating.
So, and there is a difference between a landscape architect and a landscape designer. And a lot of people don't know this. So I went to school for 5 years, whatever it took. And then I had to work under a landscape architect. And then I had to take a test. And it took me 3 tries. Okay. It was not an easy test. We do grading, we do drainage, we do irrigation and planting. So there's a lot that we know. We're kind of generalists and
Yeah.
put that into the design and on the page.
Mhm.
And a lot of people don't know that we have the capabilities of doing that. Um,
Yeah, I
and
didn't know that. I mean, literally, and we've talked numerous times, right?
Mhm,
Face to face. We've
mhm,
we've chatted about a little bit of everything. And I literally thought it never dawned on me the design that's going into this from a more not just an aesthetic perspective. That's
mhm,
where I was going, wait a second.
right.
I'm thinking it's just aesthetics, but no, it's bigger than that. And also the fact that you guys are creating the what I guess I could call the hard lines of things, right? Because that's what I'm thinking building, that's what an architect does, right? They create
Mhm,
the hard lines of it,
right.
and then the contractor executes that. And I thought you guys were the executors of that. So that's incredible.
Yeah, no, we don't install. You don't see these hands in any dirt. I don't do that. I know
How
people go, "Oh,
dare
you
you?
must love to garden." No, I don't. No, I don't. No, that's no. I'm on a computer every day. That's what I do. In my
Right,
mind, I design, and that's how I like it. I love that people love to garden. It's just not my thing.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not the first thing I think about is let me go out. I mean, I buy plants and I try to I keep them alive, but I'm more of an indoor plant than an outdoor plant
Yeah.
person. But that doesn't mean that we don't like that. But that's part of what you're doing is you're actually improving your property value. And that's how you look at it, whether it's commercial or school, public or private, is that's how you have to look at it. So you have to look at the plant material where it's at. There's now new green code, so you need to have a certain percentage that in parking lot, a certain percentage of shade calculations on the landscape and on the hardscape. So it's a lot of numbers. People don't realize that. They just,
Yeah.
oh, you just drop circles. Yeah, that's what it looks like, but I have to then calculate it and verify it so that it goes through the
Mhm.
municipalities fairly quickly.
That's amazing. The other thing I love about this discussion is it really opens, for those people, listeners that are with us at any point when they're watching this video,
Mhm.
is that this is another thing maybe kids aren't exposed to. You know,
I
that's
agree, and
incredible.
that was something I was involved with in Southern California when I was working down there, and I worked in LA County and Orange County and Riverside County. San Diego County, I did not. So you can see it was pretty much most of that area.
Yeah.
And I was involved in BIA, which is Building Industry Association, and part of that has an educational arm, which is HBC, Home Builders Council. And we would go out to schools and we would talk about, whether it's college all the way to kindergarten, and I would bring in, this is what I do, just to give an understanding of the opportunities. I was so surprised to see how many students knew what a landscape architect. I didn't know until I went to college. Oh,
Right.
okay, landscape, okay, it's architecture, and now I can draw, so that's good.
Yeah.
um, so it's variety. A lot of I know with my husband, San Luis Obispo sort of being on the coast, most of my husband's classmates have gone into more planning or more government work.
Oh,
Where because I'm down in Pomona and LA, and you had a lot more opportunity to get work, it
mhm.
was a lot more private. You know, you going into private firms or larger firms like that. And I've
Yeah.
worked at a lot of landscape firms only. And then here, when I got here to Bakersfield, I worked for a local multidisciplinary engineering firm. So they would have a title, someone who draws up the title lines, and they would have land surveyors, and they would have traffic surveyors, and they would have civil engineers, and that kind of opens my eyes to what's, you see what's coming along. Ooh, am I going to get that project? Cool, because I'm kind of at the end of the line, you know.
Yeah.
Um, uh, after those people have been chosen and start out, and then they say, okay, this is what you have, and then
Mhm.
you work with that. So probably our biggest project to date
Mhm.
would be the new high school here in Bakersfield. It's
Wow.
about
Which one?
40 acres. It's called Del Oro High School. It hasn't opened yet. I think we're just finishing up, and it's going to start building this year sometime. So
Wow.
it's a big campus, probably one of the largest quads I've seen here. And it's on Cottonwood in Panama. So there's a lot growing when it comes to Northeast, or Northeast,
Southeast.
Southeast, my bad.
Yeah. Southeast.
So that's, sort of starting to bridge that gap between Arvin and Lamont and Bakersfield. It's amazing, Kern County, we have all these sort of areas in between, and
Yeah.
it's really starting to grow and probably will continue to do that. So that has
Absolutely.
been really exciting. We work with a large architect, HMC, down in Ontario. They have, of course, several offices all throughout the United States.
Mhm.
And we worked with a local civil engineer, and
Mhm.
that was Swanson Associates, and then other people as well as the school district. So working with school districts a lot, we learn who the school district people are and work with them, what they prefer, what kind of planting they prefer, what kind of irrigation they prefer. We typically don't get to do a lot of hardscape, but we were involved in a lot of that kind of design with the high
So
school. So
when
that
you
was
talk
exciting.
about hardscape, for a second, what does that
Sure.
mean?
That means your concrete paths. That means any kind of walls. It means any kind of, we didn't do necessarily the lighting, but it means if you have a site amenity that would be a bench or a trash receptacle, or a picnic bench. It could mean sculptures. It could mean, it could mean overhead structures like what they put over play equipment, one of them, and over the play equipment. Um, those
That's
kind of things.
incredible. So,
Yeah.
okay, so I got to go back to this because, again, as
Sure.
you're talking, it's just, it's so fascinating to me because people tend to think, again, I'm thinking of the kids right now, and I
Right.
think how important this particular message is for this moment is hear this job in theory is hard work when you went to school, right? But how
Mhm.
fun that you get to design these basically when us regular folk, and I say regular folks, those of us that are going to walk that street and we're going
Mhm.
to go to that school,
Right.
it's an experience that you've created for the community, and I think that's so amazing. And I want people to go, oh my gosh, son, daughter, have you thought about this? I know during the time that the West Park Freeway was
Mhm.
being built, you can ask my son and even my daughter at that point. They were both, I think Kenny was in high school or going into high school at that time. And I'd always say, that's math right there. That's math and that's math in action. And so many times we say, oh, you're not going to need this when you leave high school or elementary school or whatever point, however high you go. I hope you go higher than elementary school. I
Yeah.
realize what I said, but the reality is these structures are mathematical designs, and how fun is that? So
That is amazing. Some of the, I mean, when you think of, we'll talk about just math alone. And you think of the structures when we have freeways going over each other and crossing, that was like the Tower of Babel.
right.
You can't, how they do that, let alone over a gorge, right? And you have this long bridge. So it is amazing what engineering can do.
Yes.
Um, uh, and we're just, we get to be a part of that. That's really exciting. I think people don't, I know people, oh, I don't like math. Well, I use math every day. Okay,
Every day.
every day I do areas, I got to count things up, I got to, what's the cost estimate of certain things, and do all that. And it's simple math. Just know your math.
Well, and
Okay.
I also think that people get afraid of math, but
They
it's
shouldn't
like
be.
I had a friend of mine tell me one time, rocket science isn't hard when you understand how to calculate it. And basically math is, it grows upon itself, right? We talk about compounding interest and things of that nature. You actually need to know that stuff, right? Because you need to understand, and you need to know amortization, right? I'm going to buy this house, bring it to real world scenarios. I'm going to buy this house and they're going to amortize it over 30 years. What the heck does that mean?
That's
So
a big
again,
word.
these conversations get me so excited
Mhm.
because I think as Americans, we've gotten a little lazy in our dedication to our education. So these are real life situations where education is helpful to all of us, and it's called math. Bummer. Two
And
plus
it's
two equals
fun.
four is getting
it's
us
it's
places.
problem solving, and that's what really we do is you take a property and you listen to the owner and you look at the municipalities and what they wanted to do, and you go, what can we do? How do you want this to function? How do we make it work? You work with other individuals. You say, hey, I need you to move that, or we need to provide this, or Cal Green just changed something and we need to deal with that in the process, or um, it might be something that's already in the ground and
Yeah.
you're just making a renovation. Oh, well, now we're having problems with the irrigation. How do we get it to go there? How do we get it to get connected with the one controller so everybody can use it? So that's really what we do
Yeah.
is problem solve, and it just tends to be more 2D. I know it's going in 3D. We haven't gone there yet. I mean, when I still worked in Riverside County, even Orange County, on paper. On
Yeah.
that draft board, when they always show that, they all talk on Hollywood, that's a landscape architect, and I roll my eyeballs. Architect or landscape architect, they're not on that thing anymore. Okay, it ain't
Right.
happening. It's all on the computer.
Yeah.
Um, but I do remember that, and using pen and using Mylar and using pencil and the way to draw and using Cora and all that stuff, and yet been able to jump up into now using the computer. And I'm sure that in the future we'll have to learn to do some 3D, but up to now it hasn't been advantageous for us to do that. And
Mhm.
so we're just, now it's just getting used to all these other technologies like Zoom and social
Right.
media and trying to ride that wave, right?
Right. Yeah,
Um,
exactly. All these new
but
things.
it's always learning, and that's a really wonderful thing. So we have a good time, always learning new plant materials, always learning more irrigation, how to do something better, learning about the law and how to be able to bring our properties into that.
Mhm.
um, Learning about how I work with C27s, which is a landscape contractors, licensed landscape contractors. If you have a contractor, you should be able to get on, I think it's ca.gov, and go to CLSB, which is California License SB, State Board.
Okay.
And you should be able to find your contractor on there,
Mhm.
okay? Because so many people go, and even my mom drove me nuts. I said, Mom, you get a landscape person come in, and they took away what was it, a saga palm. They used to be really cool. Tell anybody, because some people still go, oh, can't you get money for it? No, nobody wants those things anymore. So just get rid of them. But
And
when
don't
you have,
stop putting down the pools.
but if you, yeah, they're pokey, aren't they? But you have a contractor come on your property, they should be licensed, and I'll tell you why. Because if someone isn't licensed and they get hurt on your property, you're responsible for them. They're not bonded, they're not licensed, they don't, I don't know if they even have any insurance, but a true landscape contractor has to have that. So you look on CSLB and you put in the name of your contractor, and there should be a license number, and he should have it on his card, whether it's someone who takes care of your trees, whether it's a plumber has to have a license, electrician has to have a license. Um, so there's all these other things that I would really love the public to know. Don't deal with people who are unlicensed. Now, a gardener is different than a C27. A
Mhm.
gardener can work on your garden, and basically they're maintaining it. And basically they just do they do a sprinkler head here and there. So it's not a huge amount of it's like $500 at the most at a time. You go beyond that, then you need to have a license. But people don't know that.
Right.
And so they get a lot of people said, oh yeah, I can do it, I can do it. If you can do it, get a license, be on board, be upfront. As a real estate person, you're licensed, That license means something. You worked
Absolutely.
hard for that. So the
Absolutely.
same thing with landscape architect and landscape designer. So landscape designers can do plant material. They cannot do hardscape. They cannot do irrigation unless they have an irrigation designer certificate. Um, so there's a lot of that. You know, people, you know, wake up, I'm going to do a fairy garden, whatever. You know, do what you got to do, but understand when you have somebody on your property and they can get hurt, you can be responsible for it. And you really should deal with license. I know it seems like, oh, well, they're more expensive. You know why? Because they have insurance, because they have bonding, because they have to have, you know, all these things to be a business citizen.
Right. I would also think that, oh, that's good. I like that term, business citizen. But I think the other thing that's important about that is you have some level of warranty when you're dealing with someone licensed. You have some place to call back to and say, you know,
There's
XYZ
a
was wrong. Well,
Right, there was a problem, then you can go, but if they don't have a license, you don't have that ability to say that person harmed me. And I need an opportunity to, whether it's suit or say they need to pay me back or whatever. And you hear that, you know, with a lot of other contractors too. I mean, if you watch Mike Holmes, he tears around the whole house because everybody did everything wrong. But and I'm sure they didn't totally do it all wrong, and I'm sure they were licensed too.
right.
But then you at least have an opportunity, or should take the opportunity, to go ahead and talk to the licensing board and say, I have an issue.
Right, exactly. So I have a question for you. 2008, you guys lost your jobs and you
Yeah.
decided we're going to open up a business.
Well,
That
okay.
part of your story sounded so familiar to ours. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. 2008 in November, I lost my job in
Hey, that was
January.
the decline. That was like recession period.
That was the Great Recession.
And I
Um,
like,
and then Jim lost his job. He was actually living. Now we work out of our house. I work with my husband. He's a landscape architect as well. So he was actually here in our house working, and he was working telecommunicating for a business down in Costa Mesa, Nuvis. And so he had been there almost 20 years and lost his job too. So we're like, what do I do? This is what we know. And you're like, okay. And so we just happened to, I had a client that when I was let go at my multiple disciplinary engineering firm, the client, because they wanted only a landscape architect, came to me and said, can you do something? I'm like, yeah, I'm licensed in California. I could do that. And then it was just basically doing that together. And it's so helpful to have a partner. I don't know about anybody else, but it really is. Both Jim and I were kind of jump into that. And he had sort of,
here for sure.
yeah, been here like 10 years, and nobody really knew, because he's not one to go out and market and talk about. That's my job, what Rios Design Studio, but he is very good at his job. And so we've been able to expand, and people who had known me from working at the other place, architects and whatnot, we were able to start relationships with and work with. And we have been so blessed. I mean, people come to me, oh, do you need help marketing? I don't need any more leads. Thank you. I really don't. Okay. I'm just trying to keep the people happy that I have. And we have recurring clients, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So we're very blessed.
I love it. So, you know, on a video I shared not long ago, I was just sharing my own story, how I got in the business, and then talking about being a business owner. So the other thing we like to focus on is just helping people bridge that gap who are maybe sitting on the fence wanting to go in to make that jump to be business owners. What are some things what kind of advice or tips would you give? Oh, the one thing I said is it's not for the faint of heart, because there are days you question your sanity.
Well, that's just about every day, but I think what we're really talking about, first of all, do it. Okay. I think being an entrepreneur, you change the hat from being an employee to being an employer, and now it's yours, and it means something totally different. I would say do something you love, but not everything you're going to do you're going to love part of business. Okay. But you have to learn it, and you have to go through it. And if you don't love it, find somebody else who does and hire them. But it's really important to do that. It's what gets you up in the morning. You go, this is what I got to do. And I have a brother like, oh, you guys work so long. Yeah. but it's ours.
Right.
You know, we get to determine who we want to work with and who we don't want to work with.
Right.
And if
You also,
someone you see, go ahead.
go ahead, sorry.
Um,
I was just going to say that, the other thing is you talked about the waking up in the morning. It's a different motivation for sure.
mhm.
It's a different, and it's not that you don't give your all to the person you work for, because you do, but
Yeah.
you realize there's even more inside of you.
Yes.
You know?
It's wonderfully powerful, and I would hope that more people would take that. And even if you fail, so you fail, you get back up again and you move forward. Could I be an employee again? Sure. I would look and do things differently. I think I was always one to raise my hand if I had an idea. I realized I had to make it work, and so I would make it work wherever I worked. I'd go, okay. I'd go to another job and I'd say, here, I know this, this, and this, and I think that improves things, so I'm going to show you how to do it.
Mhm.
And not always, people don't necessarily think of that. They don't look to how, not only how do I improve what I'm working on, but how do I improve the efficiency of it, and working with others better, and whether it might be processes and forms to go ahead and to hand that off to somebody else so they know how to do it. It is a different world, but we are so lucky now, especially with Zoom and all these webinars we have locally. It's a SBA funded. It's called Kern Women's Business Center. And it's not just for women. Have you ever heard of it?
I have not. My gosh, why
We
haven't I heard
have we have it here, and I will go ahead and send you their newsletter. They have lots of stuff going on, whether it's bookkeeping, whether it's marketing, whether it's my mastermind, whether it's what books you read. I mean, they just so many things, and there's a lot of really talented people like yourself, and you probably be great on that, talking about, okay, how do you start up what you're doing now, which I think is fascinating. It's wonderful to be able to interview people and get to know people, isn't it?
it's fun.
And
It's my happy place. It's weird. It's like, where'd it
no, I
go?
totally get that. And that's the other thing, that just because you start something doesn't mean you have to do it all the rest of your life. That we as women, and I'll say even men, you go, because that recession could have been that time that I had to totally change my mind and do something different. And don't think I didn't go through that in my head.
Of course.
And even the recession I'm sure that we're dealing with coming up now, and we know something's going to come. How do you pivot? How do you move that?
Right.
And what is it that you can do? Who do you need to know? And that's part of networking and connecting with different people. And that's really the big difference. I think when you're an employee, you don't, and that's what I did do, is you don't tend to go out and network for your company. And I'd say, hey, I'll go to HBC and BIA and SMC, and I was doing all that. And they're like, sure, I can't be there, and I would be representing them. And then sometimes they got a little scared, because I'm like, I'm not going anywhere, right? But that was my way of learning how to network and how to get your name out and your reputation. And then you want to get involved in organizations. We're going to talk about that, so we might as well segue, right?
Yeah,
And the organizations give you an opportunity to work with people who may not know what you do, but when you work together and they see you get it done, then they know, okay, I want to work with that person, or I want to refer that person to them, because I don't know what they do exactly, but I know they do something that can help you.
yeah.
And I think
That
that
is
gets
so
you.
good. Hold on one second.
Okay.
That is so good. The other piece of that puzzle, I think, is organizations bring people from every facet of life. So even though it may be a business group, it's still bringing people with different backgrounds, different businesses, obviously. But I think it exposes you to a piece of the world you don't even know about.
I think it also gives you confidence.
Yes,
You can
agreed.
talk to anybody. I mean, I can. You put me in a store and I'll talk to the person next to me about the weather or whatever, right? But the point is it gives you a little bit more confidence. Hi, I'm Megan Rios, Rios Design Studio. If they don't want to know what that is, that's okay. I'm going to find out what they're doing, right? Oh, what do you do? Oh, you're in your finances. Oh, okay. Or you're a lawyer, or whatever it is that they do. And I think that's really important as a part of, if you're going to grow and try to be an entrepreneur, start with sort of some networking and broaden your base, not just so people know who you are, but they also, you know who they are. So if you need help, advisors, you start to do that. And I think, you know, that's why I'm involved in NABO particularly, and that's National Association of Women Business Owners. We have a chapter in Bakersfield.
Now, were you a founding member of that? Because I think in the introduction I may have said that. Is that true?
Yes, actually, I was one of the. We just actually chartered. We're a year old. We chartered, so
Happy
we just got
birthday.
it started. Yeah, I know, and that was in October, so that was really cool. But yeah, I had been. It takes a while because you have to have so many members, and so we finally got that number of members, and then we were able to charter and chartering for this area. And I mean, you think about just not only Bakersfield, but the whole San Joaquin Valley could really use areas where women and men can get together, and to be able to talk about, you know, it's educating, it's networking as well, but probably the biggest part is the advocacy. And that's probably my biggest passion, is the advocacy gives you an opportunity to find out what's really going up in Sacramento, and it's statewide. NABO is actual national as well, but you know, I try to stay in the state. There's enough going on in California to stay on top of,
Right.
to be able to do that. But statewide, to get to know who your representatives are, so you can be able to already have a relationship with them before you have an issue that you need to bring to their term, if you ever have an issue. But just getting to know what's really happening. And NABO is one of the organizations I'm involved with. I'm the president-elect and also advocacy chair. And my advocacy actually started for CLCA, California Landscape Contractors Association.
Hold on one second, Megan. I want to say this. When you talk about advocacy, I think so many people sit and we sort of let things happen to our society or happen in our communities. What I really like about you really bringing out the point of advocacy is talk about what that looks like. You know, you said you want to get to know your elected officials. You don't just want to get to know them from the perspective of, yeah, that guy or that gal seems pretty cool, but really understand where they stand on issues that you believe in, so that at the end of the day, you don't wake up one day and go, wait a second, what happened to my community? You know,
well, that's pretty much what's happening now. But yes, because people are so busy.
Right.
Let me just say a little bit about CLCA, and then I'll go through the whole understanding advocacy. So I started with CLCA. My husband had gotten involved with it. Landscape Contractor Association. So again, land licensed people I want to and work with all the time. And then I got more involved with that, and I became I got on the state board or the state committee, and that's where you want to connect with organizations that have a lobbyist that can sort through everything that goes through and say, this is what's affecting you. And then you should, as a group, discuss that. Does that affect us? Do we want to support? Do we want to oppose? How do we want to act to this when we hear? And we could go through legislation and all that craziness. There's a wonderful dance. They do like the Watusi or something, back and forth in this committee. And then finally at the end, you could have something totally different, but you still need to know what's there so you can go ahead and stand for it or stand against it or just let it go. So that's what I learned with CLCA. So I did become the director of legislation for a couple of years for CLCA, and I'm moving now into president-elect for the state chapter, which is exciting. I think I'll say as a woman, and that shouldn't really matter, but to be also as a landscape architect and be able to represent them as a whole. Again, license to license. So there's lots of different words for it. There's public policy, advocacy, legislation. The whole point in all of them is know what bill is being written, who's writing it, why they're writing it, decide on whether you want to support or oppose or watch, and then do whatever actions. And typically actions are writing letters, making phone calls. Who has a fax? I don't know, but you could fax. Right? All they can do is turn it off and never hear from you again. But emails and letters, those are really important. In fact, if there's a particular bill that really gets your goat, I would suggest finding out where it is on a specific committee and writing a letter to that committee. that is probably the biggest impact. And that way you have a group of whether assemblymen or senators, and we're just talking state. I'm sure it's the same way when it comes to federal, but I'm just talking on that level, where they discuss things. And then you can have one letter being read. And there's not a lot of people who write there to a committee. So that really gives them an impact of constituency that say, we don't like this or we do like this, continue to move forward. Representatives, we're really blessed here. We have two great ones. We have Assemblyman Vince Fong and Senator Shannon Grove. And with CLCA, because they're an organization, and I'm the advocacy or legislation person, we had them on our last Zoom meeting, and it was awesome. Because when you can get from them your organization, your members, to be able to know who their representatives are. In the past, when it's not COVID, they could shake their hand and look face to face and say something, but still have that connection. I think it's extremely powerful for every citizen to have.
I do too. The other thing is it makes the process very real. I think when you're not involved, and this is not encouraged. What to me at this very point, what I hear you saying is encouraging people to get involved in the processes that affect each of us. They really do.
They really do.
This is not about party. This is about us being a people that live in the same place, saying, what is our place going to look like? You know, how are we going to take the trash? What days are we going to take the trash out? You know, that's a silly example.
How are we going to afford this?
That's exactly.
You know, is the budget balanced? I mean, we've had at CLCA Representative Zach Scribner, and he talked about how the county really balances budget. That was good to hear, because so many times you don't hear about that at all. You don't know that that's really what's going on, and so you want to hear those kind of things. And it's important to hear from the county, from the city, local, close, as well as statewide, as well as nationally. And I try to. That's my focus when I go on to whatever group that I want to. And obviously Bakersfield Republican Women Federation, you and I both know each other through that. That was the whole point, is to get more information and to connect my other organizations. So I choose to be on advocacy because it's, number one, it's easier. I'm on the same line and thinking the same way. Then I get to hear from other people. How do they feel? What are they going? Like with NABO, we are connected with BizFed. And have you ever heard of BizFed?
I've not heard of them. No, what the heck is that?
It is a large organization it's more about advocacy, about larger groups. So you're going to have ERA, you're going to have Paramount, or wonderful companies.
But associated with business and
with ag, you're going to have ag, you're going to have oil, you have Southern California gas, and then you're going to have other ones connected who discuss what's going on. And again, what are we going to do? So they take that, what I just said, listen to what's going on, discuss how it affects us, and discuss how to deal with it. Do you go ahead and send a letter? Do you go ahead and send somebody else? Is there a representative you want to support through campaign, or you want a relationship? If you really want to get to know your representatives, you got to pay for them. It just is. That's what campaign is all about. But once you campaign, then you have an ear now. Now they're going to listen. And now they go, okay. And not that they know that you gave them money, because they don't act that way at all. But you know you have a better, you already have some skin in the game yourself. So now you're going to go ahead and you're going to connect with them, because now we have that. I think that's, for me, it's connecting the representatives with your members in your association and giving them a voice and an opportunity to be proactive instead of because they're really good up in Sacramento. If you remember a couple years ago, when all of a sudden in 2 days they said yes to $15 an hour that everybody had to have to, that was done in just a couple of days, because they knew they couldn't pussyfoot around. Otherwise people would hear about that and they go, wait a second, we're not going to let this happen. So I just happened to be there. It was like in April or something for through CLCA. They have a legislative conference, action conference, and they were talking on the steps, but it was like almost done already. And so you kind of have to know what's being how bills are being written and who's authoring it, and is it, when they start, is it just a placeholder, or they have something else in mind. Due to COVID, our representative in the state have definitely, they've been told they can only author so many bills this year, where in the past we're talking thousands. I think each one, and I'm sure there's a lot still, have 10 or 12 that they can do. So just imagine, right? Now it's only 500 they have written.
Refreshing. That's refreshing. If each representative only gets 10, we actually have some time we can read them.
Right. But that's not normal. That's not your normal. That's due to COVID, just because they're worried about their staff and getting that through, and then being able to go through the proper motions and that they have the processes that they've done. So it's very interesting. Like I said, it's kind of a dance. You author it and you speak on, and then it goes through all the committees and yay, and then it goes to the Senate, all their committees, and they are yay, and then it goes over here. Then they can totally gut and amend, which means take it all and give it something else, and then represent it. And you're like, whoa. So you have to watch the whole dance.
Well, it's so funny because what today has become, not only telling us a little bit about you and this, you've just hopefully encouraged and enlightened folks not only to dig into different career opportunities for themselves and their kids, but also to, you think about the things that I'm thinking specifically in 8th grade. I remember that's when we learned the preamble, and it was a focus on American history. And so, we tend to always look at the history that seems controversial, or instead of watching when our Senate is doing what they're doing, it's the Constitution coming to life. And I think it's really important that we all understand it, maybe take ourselves back to 8th grade, just for some refreshers, to make sure that the folks we send up there are doing what we want them to do, not just because we think they have on a really cute suit or
a nice little pin, right?
Exactly. Or that they are well spoken. So many times people are well spoken, but maybe what they're saying we really don't agree with, but the cadence of their voices has us a little distracted. So I really love all this information you shared. As always, I love sitting and chatting with you. You always bring some fire to the party, and I love that. So we'll have to do this again. We're at our time.
Would love to.
I greatly appreciate you doing this and just sharing yourself. So good. It's awesome. I love that people get to, I have such I say this a lot, but I really have been blessed to have amazing people in my life. And you are one of them. And this has been good and fascinating and fun. And so thank you again so much, Megan.
You're welcome. Thank you for letting me spend some time with you. I haven't got a chance to do that very much, but this is just as good as going to lunch together and being able to do that. So, and I love being able to share some of the things about what I do and about my passions of advocacy and entrepreneurship. I'd love to continue to talk with you about those things and other things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So folks, if you have any questions or there's additional information you want to hear from Megan, we can definitely have her back on and talk about some of these fun things and delve a little bit deeper. As always, this is it's important to know a whole bunch of stuff, right? Because that's how we make the best decisions. It enriches our lives. So feel free to send me an email if you'd like to be part of the show. You can send a direct message. You can make a comment below and share the videos, comment, share all that fun stuff to grow the audience. Also, feel free to go onto YouTube and subscribe to the channel All Things Paris so that you get notifications when new stuff pops up. In the meantime, have an amazing day and thanks for tuning in.
Bye, everybody.